Alternate Realities closed over 6 years ago. For the past 12 months, I've been reuniting with the old gang as we all weathered a very dark year. But now, dawn has finally broken, a new day beckons, and it's Halloween once again. This is the concluding chapter of the LongAR Halloween. Welcome to the LongAR Halloween, a My Comic Shop history tale. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 13, Fun. And joining me to celebrate Halloween once again is Alternate Realities legend, Dr. Bill Maio.
Anthony, I'm so happy to be here for this. I forgot it. It's not crime and punishment this time. It's friendship and fun, which is great.
That's right. Taking our cues from the Batman Long Halloween storyline, which, well, you might as well just announce this right now. You are going to be joining me. You're going to be making your Digging for Kryptonite debut, my other podcast about Superman. We're going to be doing a spotlight episode on Batman. And fittingly enough, after this year of the LongAR Halloween on My Comic Shop history, for that Batman-centric episode of Digging for Kryptonite, we're going to be talking about Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Long Halloween saga.
I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I just finished it last night. I hadn't read it in, maybe a decade or more. And so I certainly have a lot to talk about, but we're not going to get into that today. But I'm excited for when we do have our conversation. And I think also, in terms of recording, I think we're doing it next month. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think it's funny because the penultimate episode of the Long Halloween is Memorial Day, which is the weekend we're recording this. So I'm doing the last two back to back. It's like the last two chapters of the book. I don't know if there's a connection there. Maybe not. I don't know. I was more excited than I should have been.
No. So Labor Day. So yeah, Labor Day is the penultimate.
Sorry.
So to pull back the curtain, we are recording this finale of the LongAR Halloween on Labor Day weekend. But of course, by the time this comes out, people will have already heard the Labor Day episode with Pete Dwyer making his podcast debut. And then, so late October, early November will be our Batman Long Halloween episode of Digging for Kryptonite. And I'm excited. It felt fitting. You were here for the beginning and the end of this. And though we have to give credit, at least in part, to Brian O'Day for inspiring.
Oh my gosh, I felt so bad last night.
So, by way of quick recap for our audience here, Brian O'Day, one of our beloved Alternate Realities community members, he was on this podcast. He was part of the LongAR Halloween, the LongAR Halloween, for the St. Patrick's Day installment. What was fascinating to me was that Brian listens to the show, and he had even made specific mention of listening to the prior episodes in the LongAR Halloween, in which we never talked about Batman, the Long Halloween. And also in terms of, setting up the recording, not once did I ever say, hey, make sure you reread Batman, the Long Halloween. Yet, in the final minutes of the episode, he was like, oh, so I guess I read Batman, the Long Halloween for nothing. So that's the setup. And I had, I guess, forgotten this, but I think in that episode, I said to him, I was like, well, when I eventually cover Batman, the Long Halloween on one of these podcasts, we can talk about it. I forgot about that.
I know.
I forgot about that. It's on me. And so I booked you, of course, to discuss the Batman story. And then last night in our private Facebook group for the Alternate Realities crew, you posted.
Oh, so I was excited. I was like, oh, I just finished reading this. It really holds up. And his quote was something like, I don't know. It was like really heartbreaking. I guess we're not doing it. Bill's a good replacement, though. It's like, oh, shit.
I know. I felt he, you gotta give Brian O'Day credit because he took it he just took it in stride. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
He was like, oh, I guess it's not me, but if it's going to be someone else, I'm glad it's Bill. And he was like, fine. But as I said in my response, I think there might be a Brian O'Day cameo in the episode that you and I do. So it'll all,
I think it'll be perfect.
It'll all work out. We have so much to talk about, but actually talking about Brian O'Day prompts something that I wanted to talk about, and we might as well do it now. Sure. It's important. I've been saving this story because I've recorded multiple episodes of the LongAR Halloween since it happened, but I was saving it for the end. I figured I shared this with you. I posted about it on my personal Facebook page, but I've not posted about it on any of the Flat Squirrel accounts, and I haven't talked about it on the show. It's nothing overly dramatic, but I think as we get to the end of the LongAR Halloween, and I'm kind of looking back on all these conversations that I've had and thinking about AR generally, like this little story kind of, I don't know, just it really stayed with me. So over Father's Day weekend, my wife and I and our son, we went down to my mother-in-law in her place in South Jersey, very close to Philly. And it's a 2-hour drive from where we are. So a decent, I mean, not the most epic Hill? Journey. It's right around there. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we stopped once about halfway through, right as we got onto the New Jersey Turnpike. And it's the same like rest area we'll typically stop at. Mostly so we figured Milo can get out and walk around and stretch and everything. Mind you, this kid was great on that. I don't think he even needed the rest, but we stopped and we got out.
Yeah.
But we really were kind of debating it. Like as we were driving, we're like, maybe we just keep going. And then we were like, let's not push our luck. Like he's been really good, but let's give him a break. So we all get out of the car, and of course, caffeine addict over here, I wanted to get Starbucks. So I was walking with Milo outside, and Steph was going to go into Starbucks, but then the line was too long, and we don't want to wait. And so we started to head back to the car. And as we're opening the doors and like starting to load Milo in, I noticed that something has caught Steph's attention on the other side of our car. And so I kind of look over, and I see this car pull up, and there were a few empty spots next to us, and I saw this car pull up like right next to us. And I couldn't quite see inside yet, but I saw someone it seemed like they were looking at us. And my first thought was like, okay, we're going to have a problem here. Like this is going to be like this.
Exactly. Going to throw down.
Yeah. And I mean, look, not to get too heavy here for a minute, but anti-Asian violence is an issue. Yeah. And I have an Asian wife and son. So that's something that, I mean, to be honest, I'm always on guard. Like when we go out, like that's always, anyway.
Oh, for sure. Especially now. Yeah.
Especially now. So it's like, I was a little bit, and plus just with COVID generally, I don't want to be near anyone. So it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
And who gets out of the car but Brian O'Day?
So fucking random. I love it. And so he was headed where? Was he headed north or south, this guy?
South. He was headed to a wedding in Philadelphia.
I love it. It's such a random occurrence,
It's like for us to be, heading in the same direction at the same time and both decide to stop at the same place at the same time. And if any part had been, like if there hadn't been a long line in Starbucks, we probably wouldn't have run into it. Like there were so many little things. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the first time he met Milo in person. So we did that and we posed for a picture. Yeah. Steph took a photo of Brian and myself with Milo.
Yeah.
And I posted on Facebook, and the caption that I went with was, alternate realities is wherever you make it, especially at a turnpike rest stop. Now that could have certain connotations. I didn't mean it that way, but
like a George Michael type connotation.
Listen,
but it wasn't. It's so great. I'm so glad that happened. I always wonder or think about when you have like a random occurrence with anybody in life, you always think about your day. It's like, man, if I didn't stop for 5 seconds to do this, I wouldn't have been at the store at that exact moment to see this happen. Like it's always amazing to me that the stars kind of align for that. I have a similar story that I'll tell you, but that involves the AR crew. But this goes back a long time. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Of course.
Okay, this is a funny story. So me, Brandon, and my brother and Casey were driving in a car, surprisingly, to Chiller. I think it was called Chiller Theater. I want to say it was like a New Jersey, also in New Jersey, convention, right? Once a year, a horror convention. And so we were driving in the car, trying to get there, and there was some contention on what exit we needed to get off at. And this is before phones had navigation, and before there was we just kind of winged it. And there was a really funny conversation there about Brandon going, we'll see who's right, we'll see who's wrong. It was really funny. But that's not the point. Point is, we finally get to the Madison. It wasn't Madison Square Garden. Whatever big arena is out in New Jersey. It was being held at, right? We're going up the parking structure, trying to find a spot. You can never find a spot, right? We're going up to like the 10th floor looking for a spot. We finally find a spot, and we go to pull in, and it's Odo 1. And it's Harry Odo's car because him and Steve and Evan were at the convention. It's like, how is that even possible that the only open spot, the first open spot we found, was next to the Odos? It was so great. So then Brandon writes this like really long note about like, oh, I'm so sorry, I hit your car. He just like really wanted to aggravate Steve, right? This whole thing. And so we met up with him at the show. We didn't say anything about this note. And then later on, we're like, hey, did you notice we parked next to you? He didn't notice. And then we're like, we left you a note. He's like, oh, there was a piece of paper on my car. It flew off as soon as I left. He didn't even read it. But it's the same idea. Well, it's not the same. I mean, you got to see Brian O'Day, which is great. But I always thought that was a really random thing to like pull in next to Steve Oto's dad.
I know, it's wild. I mean, I always go back to that episode of How I Met Your Mother, The Right Place, Right Time, where, it's all about how, he ended up on that street corner in the rain and ran into a key player in his journey who would ultimately get him to the place where he meets the mother. And the whole episode is about like all these little things that led him to that moment. And exactly to your point, it's like if any one of those things had been different, he might not have met the mother. So, I always think about that. It was a really fun, random encounter. And I guess because, again, this goes hand in hand with me sort of reflecting now on this year's worth of LongAR Halloween discussions with the AR crew. And I guess before I offer any kind of, summation of what I've gathered from all this, I know you've listened to at least like a couple of these, right?
Oh, many of the episodes. Yeah.
I guess my question for you, especially when we talk about like keeping in touch and the bonds and all that stuff, like, are there any themes that you've picked up on, or anything that's like really stood out at you?
Well, not so much about themes, but I mean, I definitely remember key parts of certain episodes. One of them that was heartbreaking is when Steve was talking about feeling so isolated. I think that's the word he used, I want to say, during maybe COVID, but also after the store. And, with Rich Roney calling me every Saturday, I don't feel like I'm still a huge part or a key player with the store, but at least keeps me updated about what's going on. And I always felt like, well, I never felt isolated. I always had some sort of feeling of inclusion. But, to hear Steve say that, and he's at the center of it all, I called him up actually the next day. It was Father's Day too, And so, but I mean, that was certainly something. I don't know thematically though, anything that brings everything. Do you have some kind of thread that ties it all together?
So I guess two things. So
all right.
First, and I've said this in other episodes, but like credit where credit's due. Almost every person I've talked to on these episodes cites Rich Roney as the main person, like you said, like as the main person. And, again, the man only has so much time. He can't call everyone every weekend. But for those of us who are on that call list, we look forward to it. And so you heard that from a lot of people that Rich Roney, our beloved elder statesman,
I know.
He makes the effort more so than anyone else. And so I want to give credit to Rich. But isn't it so fitting? Because as we've talked about so many times, those Saturday night dinners, especially at a certain point, I mean, I feel like by the time I was going, like a lot of it really did revolve around Rich. Like, oh, is Rich coming in? And if he is, well, then there will be a gathering. And occasionally there would be if he didn't come. But that was really the catalyst for everyone getting together. So I feel like it's so fitting that now in this, alternate realities, post alternate realities, COVID life, it's like he's still the one who's making that effort and having that effect.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that comes down to something that you bring up in your documentary, right? Like, will the people at the store stick together, right? And I think Rich Roney took that to heart for sure. I mean, he would be the one that would be the biggest flight risk, knowing Rich. We don't even know where he lives, kind of thing. He can just we never hear from him again, kind of thing. Like the door closed to alternate realities, and there was Rich. But that's not the case. I can expect a phone call from him at least once every 2 weeks. And I've had that phone call with him ever since I left New York. And it's been 20 years or so that I've been talking to Rich on the phone. And it's, like you said, I look forward to it. And that episode that you did with Rich was so heartwarming. Like when you surprise him, I'll be tearing up. I don't know why I get so emotional when I talk about the comic book store guys, but I really do. But when you told him, hey, I read the first comic book you ever read, and it was just like, oh my goodness, and you had this great conversation about it. What a great way to do that episode. I don't know what made you think of that. I wouldn't even have remembered the first comic book he told me. How did that all transpire? Well,
keep in mind, if we go back to the first documentary about alternate realities, it opens with everyone talking about their first comic book.
Yeah.
Right. And so I mean, obviously, you watch the movie, you hear it, but like I edited this thing, so I heard Rich say it over and over and over and over. So it stayed with me, and I guess sort of with all of these longer Halloween installments, like in the case of Pete Dwyer that was the first time I've had him on the show, and but even for people I've talked to a lot and I've talked to on the podcast, I guess I was kind of thinking like, what other kind of angle then can I come at it from, because I don't want to just rehash like the same stuff. And I don't know. I guess the other thing too was, we talked in that episode about how we met and how I steered him away from reading that JLA Spectre Soul War miniseries that had been poorly reviewed and all that. And so I guess that just got me thinking of Rich and comics. And I don't know. I can't pinpoint anything more specifically, but I was like, I think that would be fun. And I didn't do a video version of that podcast, which I regret, because to see his face, like when I held it up, it was really great. Like that one was a lot of fun for sure. And then so credit to Rich, because he really has been making that effort to keep in touch with so many people with these calls. I got to also give credit to Mike San Gregorio's book club, because that came up a lot in these episodes as well as one of the main ways people are keeping in touch.
Especially Carolyn would mention that. Not only that, but re-engaging in comic books because of it, which is great.
Yeah, and one of the most recent things they covered in the book club was Batman: The Long Halloween.
I heard in that episode, I was like, oh man, really milking this cow.
But so I guess so that's like, not to say like I'm pivoting to the negative aspect of this, but it's just kind of fascinating to me, and I want to get your take, and we'll kind of unpack this a little bit, because again, with the exception of Rich, who makes the effort to keep in touch, all of these episodes, I've asked the guest, are you keeping in touch? Like, how have you been keeping in touch? And in most cases, it's like, oh, I'm really like, I miss everyone, but I'm not picking up the phone, or I'm not texting. It's like, if Rich calls me out, I'm happy and I talk to him, or, Mike organizes the book club, and whoever happens to be at the book club, I talk to at the book club. But there's not this added step. And look, I mean, I would include myself in this. I mean, I'm making the effort specifically now through the podcast, but I mean, in other than that, I mean, there's not a ton. And I guess maybe I thought that might change a little bit after reconnecting with certain people on the podcast, but it didn't, but that's okay. And that goes both ways. I'm not putting it on anyone else, but I don't know. It's funny to me. And I wonder for people like in the audience, what their take on this is. If they're just like, no, like that's a normal thing, or if it's sort of like, well, if you guys are such good friends and you miss each other so much, it's like, why is it so hard to make a little effort here? I don't know. Like, what do you, what's your take on this?
Well, I'll tell you, listening to the episodes, I definitely felt that, I'm negligent in getting in touch with people. That's for sure. Like, for example, I didn't know Brian O'Day had a new job, and that was incredible to hear, and just hearing everybody in general, like listening to Drew and, him talking about Star Wars. And that's like a topic that we used to talk about on the phone all the time, and hearing how, I think The Mandalorian like re-engaged him in Star Wars and things like that. I thought that was great. It's like, man, these are the conversations I would have had with him on the phone, and we would have talked for 2 hours. It's like, why am I not doing this? And so, if anything, it really made me realize that I need to start reaching out a lot more. And for whatever reason, the phone doesn't get picked up. And, I look forward to like the Rich Roney call. And, you've called me a couple of times. I pick right up. I would never not pick up the phone. But it's that effort for whatever reason. And I think maybe I need to start taking a page out of Rich Roney's book. I think we all should. I think we're such great friends, just spread out now over great distances. And for me, time zones, which makes it a little difficult. But that's not an excuse, especially with today's generation with Zoom and FaceTime and everything else like that. I mean, like, this is wonderful, getting to like talk to you and like look at you. I mean, it's unheard of years ago.
Well, you did organize, right? How many of them did you end up doing? Did any of them happen? One? You did organize like a Zoom AR gathering.
It did. I tried. I forgot who showed up. Rich Roney called in, which was really cool. I showed him how to call in using Zoom, and I was really happy he did. Oh, and Zach. It was Rich Roney and Zach. And so it was not the most dynamic conversation. It was hard to because Rich is on the phone, Zach's in person. So I think if we ever did it again in the future, I would love to organize that again in the future. I think now that I've been using Zoom for like a year, I could figure out how to make this work really well, but I don't know if everybody would be interested.
Yeah, it's
Well, you organized an in-person gathering, didn't you?
Oh, I did. So,
you guys like sat in a parking lot and ate some food together, no?
yeah. So we met up at the Shake Shack in Hartsdale. So,
okay.
And I had talked in prior episodes that I was thinking about setting something up, and I did. And so mid-July, it was about a dozen of us. It was a healthy-sized group. We met up at the Shake Shack in Hartsdale, so like a couple miles from where the store used to be. And I picked that because they have an outdoor seating area. So I figured, this way we'll be outside, we'll be safe and comfortable. And it was great. I mean, we had, Odo came, Rich, Carolyn, Steve Ryan made a return appearance. That was very surprising. Wow. Roby and his new girlfriend happened to be in town. They came.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we had there were Pete Dwyer, Steph came. There were a bunch of people. Zach and his whole family.
Oh my gosh, the whole gang was there.
Drew came. Tom couldn't make it. A few people couldn't make it. Brian O'Day never responded. He'll listen to this, so I don't know what happened to Brian, but he didn't respond. Probably boning up on the long Halloween that it ended up being for nothing. I'm so sorry, Brian.
Brian, I'm sorry. It's doubly for nothing now.
But it was really nice. The only thing was that the Shake Shack has this outdoor seating area and it's covered, but it's not solid up top.
Okay.
So it started to rain.
Oh, no. Okay.
So we moved inside, which, again, and I've talked about this in the episodes, like Steph and I have been like super, super, super cautious during this whole period. And like, basically we don't go inside anywhere unmasked. Right. But this was like the craziness with the timing of everything. This was mid-July when things were looking a lot better. And like, we were just starting to feel more comfortable. So we did go inside for a little bit. And then we left. The rest of them stayed a bit longer, but it was nice. But the thing that I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to share the story generally, but I thought you would get a kick out of this. So the rain ended up not being that bad after all. We could have stayed outside. The second that we felt the tiniest amount of precipitation, guess who the first one was to be like, oh, we have to move inside. Guess.
I mean, it wasn't Steve.
It was Steve.
Steve wasn't. Yeah, Steve.
It was Steve. Yeah,
Mr. Like umbrella. What's his? What's the Odoism there?
Mr. Steve Odo doesn't use or doesn't believe in umbrellas. He doesn't believe in gift. No, he doesn't believe in gift wrapping. He doesn't use umbrellas. It's only only water.
Yeah,
Mr. It's only water. All of a sudden, you would think this guy was made of sugar and he was going to melt. It was like I couldn't believe it. If it had been Zach and he was like, "Hey, I don't want my kids to get wet."
Whatever. Of course. Yeah.
But like, it was just so weird. It's like, what happened to you?
Yeah, he's a changed man.
I don't know. But it was nice to get together.
It's funny that I would like to talk more about that. But it's funny about the Odoisms because you brought it up with Carolyn about like, didn't you put up those Odoisms on the website? And I remember distinctly, like you go to the website and he had his his mantra, however many you guys had logged in at that moment. But it was really funny to see.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Under Brandon and Metalhead, that website was like a machine, like a well-oiled machine. They had Pokemon sales through the roof through that website. And then, Odoisms.
Well,
it is what it is.
Speaking of Odo online, so I know you see his Facebook posts. It makes me, I don't know, there's almost something comforting about it when he posts his complaints about the eBay buyers that he has to deal with.
Yeah.
It feels like you're home again, doesn't it? Reading those posts?
For sure. Because I would come in and I hadn't been in the store forever. And there's always a story about a customer that slighted him in some way that it was like, he was so aggravated. That's the only story he would tell you. And, it's wonderful too, because he gives you the whole story. He gives you quotes sometimes from the eBay guy. And yeah, it's great. And you could see too, like, it's almost like if he didn't know my eBay handle, I would be doing that to him all the time. Hey, will you take 45 on this?
Yeah, it's like people, he gets especially agitated. I mean, when people haggle generally, but some of the ones that he's been posting about, I mean, they are kind of irksome, like where people are.
Yeah, I get irked too. It's like, oh man, why would I, it is what it is.
Yeah. Where like they really go out of their way to like call him out on his pricing. And it's like, look, if don't buy it from me then. It's like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. He's so proud of his pricing too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
So I was at the, I'm trying to place this, and maybe I talked about this on the show, but I was at the warehouse. I don't know. It was months
Recently?
ago. No, well, within the past few months to pick up a couple of Superman trades that he had for me. That because when we talked about this in the 100th episode, that everything went to Skokie, all the graphic novels. But he had a couple of Superman books, and I went there, and I did tell him about that Magog statue that he better reserve for you. I'm sure he'll forget, but I did tell him.
I know, it's all right. It's okay.
But yeah,
one day.
But yeah, the eBay thing is really funny. But look,
it's great to see. You're right. You're absolutely right. I love seeing his posts in general because it's 50-50 shot of being one of those posts, and more often than not, it is that post.
Yeah.
I don't care for the ones where he just shows you pictures of what he's posting up, but not having him on Facebook for a couple of months was you miss him. I miss not seeing those updates.
It's true. It was like a 56-day sabbatical or something like that.
Which was strange. Like, why not 60? Where did that number come from? It was like high 50s. So I was like, you couldn't push this 2 more days?
I don't know. I guess he couldn't stay away. Yeah. But wait, one of the things he posted, I forgot to have this handy. So just give me a second. But the old Comics Buyer's Guide ad for alternate realities.
Oh, for alternate realities. Oh, yeah.
That he posted. Let me see if I can find it real quick just to read the copy. But that was, here it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is going back. I mean, this is the early this is like early days of the store. So this was an ad that that alternate realities had in Comics Buyer's Guide. New York's newest comic and card store. That's the top part. And it says all kinds of stuff. And comics and cards, plus videos and toys, memorabilia, original art, guest appearances, and a whole lot more. And then alternate realities, 700 Central Park Avenue, and the phone number. There you go.
So optimistic at the beginning. What do you think that ad would have looked like at the end? It's a cool ad. I had never seen that before. And, certainly a different time. I guess that was with Kevin, right? Kevin Halstead would have been owner of the store at that moment.
Yeah, it says New York's newest store. So if this was the first year or two, this was Steve, Kevin, and Gene.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's an incredible find, for sure.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff, Anthony.
All kinds of stuff.
And at the end, he did have all kinds of stuff.
It's true. Yeah, I don't know. Like what the last ad would have been. It's funny because I'm trying to think, what was the last ad he even ran? He was so opposed to it.
He did didn't he do a couple of radio ads, I want to say, maybe? Am I mistaken?
Well, the only thing I remember about radio ads is him refusing to do them because they were,
right, so maybe that's what I do remember.
Farts in the air. I just remember him saying that they were farts in the air, but I don't know if he had done them in the past. I can't remember, but certainly if he had, by a certain point, he outright refused to do them. So, but yeah, that ad was cool. For anyone, I'll post it on on my social media, like the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network and stuff like that. So if anyone wants to see it, they can take a look at it. It is pretty cool to see. Nice relic.
No, I loved it. It's so incredible to think that we can still mine things out that even we don't know about the store that I think is wonderful.
Just when you think we've covered everything.
That, right? No, we haven't. I told you could do this for years, into the future.
Yeah. No, he found it. So props to Steve. Let's take a quick commercial break and then we'll be right back. Shadadigans is a weekly podcast by dads sharing their fairly new dad experiences and also just talking about whatever. Listen, relate, and laugh. I was a guest on episode 90, and it was a blast. One of the hosts is a multiple guest of this show, Justin DeVoe. To follow Justin's fitness and cosplay journey, follow him on Instagram at RealLifeLobo. And if you're interested in starting or continuing your own fitness journey, check out Iron and Honor on Instagram. If you enjoy this show, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. I also hope you'll consider joining my Patreon community. The support of my patrons enables me to produce this podcast, and patrons get rewards too, including exclusive episodes, advanced listens, and more. Sign up today and get instant access to the back catalog. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Thank you to all of my patrons. I truly appreciate your support. All right, and we're back. So there's still so much more for us to talk about, but I wanted to give, I guess, a little tease for what's to come next year. So as you and I talked about in the 100th episode, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of this being the finale and all that stuff, because we've had multiple finales. We always come back. We'll come back. And I've settled on what my comic shop history will cover next year. I like the event series format, like we did with the LongAR Halloween, like we tried to do with the Homecoming last year before COVID wrecked it. I like that model for the show. So for next year, you know, a comic shop can't celebrate 40 years without some podcast fanfare. So coming in 2022 to My Comic Shop History will be a special 6-episode event, Their Comic Shop History, featuring Fat Moose Comics.
I love it. Love it. That's great. It's been 40 years for Fat Moose?
40
That's
years.
Wonderful.
Yep, 1982. Yeah. So we'll talk to the original owner, the current owner, our good friend Sean Hendricks, some of the customers. It'll be great. And I know Sean is planning a lot of really big fun stuff for the 40th anniversary celebration. So, you know, maybe we'll do a little, we'll do an episode about the planning of it, and then we'll do an episode after. So it'll be a lot of fun. So that's to come next year. I don't know. I was initially thinking 6 weekly episodes, like right around the time of the anniversary, but now I'm thinking I kind of like this monthly format that we've utilized for the LongAR Halloween. So I think we might do it monthly, and then that way we're kind of in the story of Fat Moose for half the year, which I think would be kind of cool. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards.
I think that's great. I look forward to listening to those and hearing the history of that store. And meeting the customers, because from what you guys have always said, it's very similar to, you know, what we had at Alternate.
Yeah, I mean, like,
so it'd be interesting to hear.
Their Rich Roney is Gene. His name is Gene. I mean, it's
that's awesome. It's like that episode of Seinfeld with the Bizarro Jerry.
Yeah, no, for sure. One other update I wanted to share. I sold most of my Pops.
You did not.
Yeah.
Did you really? All right.
Yeah, I did.
Good for you. What brought you to that decision?
Space.
Well, they do take up a lot of space if you keep those boxes, that's for sure.
Yeah, but even so, we have displayed them out of the box. So yeah, you still have to store the boxes, but at least, because some people do display them in the box, so then that really takes up even more space. But, and you know, I've mentioned this on other episodes, but you know, now that we've moved and we're in the place we expect to be, you know, for the foreseeable future, it's like I know how much space I have to work with.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if it's a matter of selling them versus, you know, just keeping them in a closet somewhere, I was like, let me get rid of these. They can go on to someone else. I've enjoyed them. I've displayed them.
Yeah.
And I kept all the ones that mean the most to me, all the ones that you would likely expect. So I kept the Smallville ones and the Batman v Superman and all that stuff. Supernatural, like The Office. Like I kept the ones that I felt, you know, most attached to, and the rest went off to our buddy Chris Wilcock at Undiscovered Realm.
Oh, great! Yeah. He's the number one place, I'm assuming, in New York for Pops.
Yeah, and it worked out great. Although I felt bad. So, have like when you were in elementary school, did you ever have the experience where, you know, you would have an assignment or a test, and like the teacher would grade it for you on the spot? Like you would bring it up and they would do it, and you're like standing there and you're waiting. Like
I do that to students right now. What are you talking about? They hate it.
It's kind of nerve-wracking. So this wasn't exactly like that, but it was similar. So I you know, we messaged ahead of time and I gave him a list, and he was fantastic and generous, and it was great. And so I packed everything up and I brought it to Undiscovered Realm and hauled him up the staircase. It's like the Midtown Comics staircase.
Yeah, it's a long staircase.
And then I left them with him, and he's like, you know, we'll go through it over the next hour. I was like, yeah, no problem. Well, Bill, it turns out that as much as you know, my nature is to keep things in good condition and to be very particular about stuff. I guess I neglected the boxes.
A difference in opinion.
No, it wasn't even a difference in opinion. It was, I guess I had neglected the boxes more than I thought, because over that next hour, I kept getting texts from Chris, and they weren't antagonistic. I think he was just keeping me posted, and you know, we had talked ahead of time. You know, he had given me sort of the guidelines for what the price would be for them, but as he reminded me, it's contingent on the condition, and you know, I was like, of course. So I think he was just keeping me posted, but I've seen these texts like, oh, this one has a ding here, this one's a little scuffed, this one has an Amazon price tag on it, price sticker that when you take it off, it messes up the box. I was like, oh my God, like I felt so bad.
Yeah.
But so like, if
you weren't the collector you thought you were. I mean, come on, Anthony.
I know. Well, in fairness, I mean, they have come in and out of the boxes a couple of times from my various
for sure.
moves.
I'm sure because you had them to love. You weren't buying them to keep them pristine in the box, and that's the difference between certain collectors. And I never understood that type of collecting, like the Steve Odo. I'll take this graphic novel in the shrink wrap and put it on the shelf, and then never read it. I never understood that. It's like, well, don't you want to read it? Oh, I've already read it. Well, then why do you have it? you know.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, so like if you go on the Undiscovered Realm site, not just my collection, but other pops, like when they buy a collection, I guess this is not so uncommon. And so the condition will be listed when you go on the website. And so for a number of mine, they say shelfware, fair, and they're priced accordingly. So,
Did you get a pedigree on the website, the Anthony Desiato collection?
No, I don't think I would have earned that. No.
Do you remember when Steve sold his comic books through Heritage? He was very upset not to get a pedigree name on it. Yeah,
I know. No, that would have been cool for him. But no, I remember him talking.
I would have definitely bought Steve Odo comic books. Let me tell you right now.
Yeah,
I say that jokingly, but I would definitely have bought those comics. So, how does it feel to have all the extra space?
Good. I mean, yeah, no, that's the thing, and hopefully this feeling doesn't change, but yeah, there was no seller's remorse. I was happy to, and like the ones that I kept, you can't, they're just out of frame, but they're in the showcase behind me, and I got these like these tiered stands to put them on, and they look great. And again, I kept the ones that I liked the most, and I was happy to kind of be done with them. I used the money to buy these like really, really nice adjustable dumbbells. They're great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Things of real value.
Yeah. And I mean, I did pretty well with the sale in terms of what I paid for these things and all that. And the last thing, let me say this too about the boxes. Some of there were some that I bought that were dinged up from Chris initially. Because like I remember there was a Negan from Walking Dead, and like he sold it as a damage. Like the box was just all mangled, and he sold it as such. And I bought it from him because I was like, I don't care about the box. I'm never going to sell these.
That's awesome.
So there were things like that. So there were some, whether I bought from him or if I ordered online, like if they came a little bit like that. So there were some like that. And then something like, again, like a price sticker that I wouldn't have even known that would have been an issue. And I bought it like that. So there, I don't want to paint myself as this careless collector here, but yeah.
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. One of them is, do you remember a customer named Gresham Gregory?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Remember that guy? Anyway, I remember distinctly he'd be in the store for sometimes hours, like looking at the comic books in the light to make sure they were absolutely perfect and pristine. And he would just be so meticulous, and like you almost didn't want to handle his comic books when you rang it up. And I remember saying to him one day as he's doing this, I was in a bad mood. I don't know what I said. I said, when you go to sell these to us, we're going to give you 25 cents a piece. Like, I don't know what you're thinking, but anyway, so that came to mind. So some people who really are pristine. I never was like that. I was always like, I'm going to love these, and if they're worth money in the future, great. I probably still won't sell them. But with regards to the pops and selling them, makes me think of a lot of conversations I had with Drew back in the day. I moved from New York to Baltimore to Philly, then out here, and I sold parts of my collection as I went. And a lot of the things that I wind up selling were the big bulky things. I had a lot of statues at one point, not as many as Drew might have had, but in thinking about moving them and potentially breaking them, I sold them rather than hold on to them. And I remember Drew said, when he sold his collection, he was a big Bowen collector, and he's like, if you ever want it again in the future, you can go get it. You can buy it. It's not like they made one of them. They made thousands of these things, and I'm sure the pops are the same way. If ever you feel like you needed that Negan, even in a shitty box, you could probably find them.
Yes. And I guess that's I guess maybe there's some comfort in that. It's like, I don't want to get to that point. I mean, I've run into that with some comics or trades that I've sold that then there were instances where then I was like, oh, I want to have it. Or now that I've been doing the Superman podcast, like there have been a few things that I had at one point that I figured, well, I'm not going to do anything with this. And I got rid of it. And now it's like, oh, I would do an episode on these issues, but I don't have them, and they're not on the DC app, and the trades are out of print, and it's like, this is kind of a hassle. So, but yes, generally speaking, no, I mean, I do agree with that. And, yeah, I guess that offers some measure of comfort as well. It's like if I absolutely have to have it again, it's like
I mean, most things can be had for any price. I mean, the years of when I first got into comics, and when alternate realities would do like the conventions down in the church basement in Manhattan. You would walk around the entire convention and see maybe one copy of like Amazing Fantasy 15, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, that incredibly rare comic book! I can't even believe I could see it. I'm not even going to ask the guy to hold it." But now you go to eBay, you type in Amazing Fantasy 15. There's probably 100 copies up there right now. And so the eBay market has kind of ruined a lot of the collectibles market. But but it's also for good, right? Because it gets things into the hands of people who will appreciate it.
Yeah, no, totally. And eBay has been my saving grace in a few instances with sourcing material for the Superman podcast. So, no, I've definitely, it's funny because like years ago, I was on eBay more regularly and then I didn't buy anything for so long. But now,
yeah,
I'll periodically pick stuff up, if I'm going to discuss it on Digging for Kryptonite. So, I always check Super Odo first, but if he doesn't have it, then I go look elsewhere.
That's awesome. So how's the Digging for Kryptonite been in general? Is this something you enjoy doing week to week?
I love it so much. I love it. I mean,
that's great.
I don't want to say that at the expense of this show. This is the first and the flagship show of Flat Squirrel Productions, and I love everything that we've accomplished on this show. But I can't tell you how much fun I'm having. I mean, it's the best sort of situation where I would say most, if not all, of the episodes, even if no one listened to them, I would still be happy I did them because I found it edifying to some degree as a Superman fan, and I so enjoyed the conversation. And so that's the space that I've been in for that show, and it's been great. And, it's funny, like more people still download this show than the other one, although the gap is kind of closing. But I get far more feedback on the Superman show, which is great.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And that's, again, nobody owes me any messages or anything like that, but it's great. Like when I put out an episode and then people will talk about their own experience with, the Ruby Spears Superman cartoon or whatever that we're talking about.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's
got to be gratifying. Yeah. And very rewarding, I'm sure. Talking about that, you must get all sorts of reviews too about the documentary. And I happened to come across one the other day because I had mentioned to one of my students, I'm like, oh, I got to record a podcast later this week. And hey, I was also in this documentary. And I was like, oh, let me find you the trailer. And the first thing that popped up was like two guys made a review of the documentary. It's like, look at that. And so what does that feel like when you, come across stuff, good or bad, that people have written about your work?
Yeah, it's funny. Tom Darby, he was on for the April Fool's Day episode, and then we actually talked about this off mic because he asked me basically the same question. And it's weird. It's kind of weird when you come across someone talking about your work. Like it is a little nerve wracking because the gut feeling is like, well, I hope they liked it. Like I hope it's a positive review. It's like I don't want to listen to or read someone like trashing this. But at the same time, you do recognize, if someone's doing a review, it's like, well, very likely that, if they're really going to give it a fair shake and a thorough analysis, it's like, yeah, there might be things they don't like. So I always try to kind of keep that in mind. I mean, thankfully, the majority has been positive, and it's like I've heard enough like nice things from strangers where I have some measure of like, okay, like this works on some level, So even if I do come across something where someone doesn't like it or they don't like some aspect of it, it's like, well, okay, like that's not everybody.
Yeah.
It's funny though. I know the one that you're talking about. I did watch that one, and there were a few things they had issues with. They didn't like the tagline. I remember. In that one, the tagline of the stores die, communities live forever, and they were like, well, but the whole thing was like they don't have their community anymore, and it's like I don't think that was the point of this, but okay, so it's like, look, people are gonna take something away from it that you might not necessarily intend, and that you gotta be okay with that.
You gotta accept that, yeah.
But no,
it's nice to know that most people, though, in general, you've had a lot of positive reviews, not only about the movies, but also about the podcast. And that's great to hear. And especially great to hear that you're enjoying doing the Digging for Kryptonite and getting a lot out of that. And it sounds like the feedback that you're getting, keeps you interested in continuing. And I like the idea that you're branching off maybe into some other characters as well, kind of keeping it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like what you and I are going to do on the Long Halloween. I mean, that's like a little bit of a pilot of what this expanded world of the show will be. Where I want to take the approach that I've used with Superman, where I'm really charting my fandom as a Superman fan, and then kind of apply that approach to other characters. So I think that'll be cool. With the movie too, though, it like I guess the other thing that I always come back to is, it's like this is what I wanted, right? Like I wanted to make a movie that got out there. And so once it's out there, it'll be analyzed and liked or disliked. And so that so I keep that in mind too. Like even if I come across something, where, it is on the more negative side, it's like, well, all right, like it's a real movie now. It's out there. Like any movie, you're going to get a variety of reactions.
I remember reading, so I watched a little bit of those two guys reviewing the documentary, but then I scrolled down to the comments. So I was like, what are people saying about this? And so many of them were like, oh, I didn't hear about this. I went and downloaded it and watched it. It's like, wow, that must feel incredible, knowing that still, like, people are discovering it and getting something out of it. I mean, I don't have anything like that. The best I have is a couple of papers that I write that maybe a few other chemists read. You made a document that, people around the world have watched.
Yeah. And well, kind of on that note, I mean, not to be mercenary about this, but that's sort of the other thing too. It's like, even if someone doesn't like it, I get paid just the same as if they did. So it's like, again, you always want good word of mouth, but it's like, hey, people are talking about it and it prompts someone else to then watch it. That's great.
Do you track sales of that still, or is it just something that every now and again you look at an account and there's some money in it?
So I get quarterly reports from the distributor. It's not it's not as broken down as I maybe would like. I mean, it doesn't necessarily say like the number of sales per platform. It just kind of lumps a couple of them together. Like the Amazon and iTunes kind of lumps them together. But it's fine. I guess I could do the math and work backwards if I really needed to. But honestly, getting it onto CuriosityStream was like really, because that was just a flat licensing fee that they paid to show the movie for 2 years. And that was, not to pull back the curtain too much, but like that was where I've seen the most, has been from that, as opposed to the Amazon and iTunes sales. That being said, if anyone somehow still hasn't watched this movie and you're listening to this podcast and you're like, if I really want to support Anthony, like what's the best way? Like rent or buy it on iTunes or Amazon. Because now with CuriosityStream, it's like, there are no residuals. There's no percentage from that. It's just that flat fee. But it's funny though, as far as feedback. So I do still hear from people about the show. And what's funny is, sometimes people will, as you know, right, like do record some of these well in advance of when they come out. And as much as I love the sound of my own voice, I don't like re-listen to all of them all the time. And so sometimes people will text or message me something about something that was in the episode. And I'm like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. Or like after the Steve Ryan episode came out, Lord Retail from Acme Comics, he texted me and he's like, I like Cobra Kai too.
It is so random because it's like 2 months later, right? Or a month later.
And I'm looking at the text and I'm like, all right. I mean, that's cool. I'm glad you do. And then it clicked. And then also in that same episode, I talked about when we went to.
I love that Jermaine, by the way, is watching religiously the show. We're listening to it. That's great.
It's the best. And then in that same Steve Ryan episode, I told a story about how when we went to New Jersey for Father's Day, my brother-in-law and we moved this like such a heavy tube television up the stairs. And then I had a buddy of mine from law school. He texted me like about his saga of moving a tube TV for his parents. So it's like, so sometimes it takes me a second to be like, why are they messaging me about this now? But no, it's cool. And so I do always appreciate, hearing from people, and I'm glad that people continue to enjoy, and I'm glad that people have come to Digging for Kryptonite. And, I mean, for any My Comic Shop History listeners who haven't, well, I sure hope you will. So,
do you have future of the podcast seems certain. Have you ever thought about, revisiting the idea of doing a documentary? You've done a few in the past now. I think you have 4 to your credit, correct?
Yeah, 4. There was another documentary I was planning pre-COVID, and then between COVID and just kind of, the thing that, I mean, this is a larger discussion about like with the documentaries, like why I'm doing them and what I'm hoping to get out of them and all of that. And so between having those conversations with myself and COVID, I just got to the point where I'm like, I don't think another documentary right now is exactly where I want to go. There are a couple, there's one other completely different type of project that I'm actually thinking about. I'll tell you off mic. So there are other projects that I'm thinking about, but I mean, for right now between work and fatherhood and all that stuff and the podcasts, I mean, that's really where the energy has been going, especially with the Superman show and getting that up through this first year and mapping out the future years and all that stuff. So that's where a lot of the attention has been. But, it's one of those things where I think I'll get that itch again, whether it's for another documentary or this other type of project that I'm thinking about. It's like, and I won't be able to ignore it and I'll do it. Like, that's the way this always goes. But for right now, I'm like really just having fun with the podcast.
For sure. I know it fulfills a need that you have and a want. But I certainly remember years ago when you were doing the Kickstarter for the documentary, and you had generally said that this is something you'd really want to explore and continue to do. And I know you got a lot of cool equipment probably sitting in the closet.
I use the camera for this. Oh,
do you really? Okay. Yeah. No way.
Yeah. So it was in the closet really for quite some time. But no, since I've been doing these video podcasts, I busted out the camera at least.
Which is why your camera looks great, and I look like, Richard Nixon in the 1970s or 60s, It's like, oh my God.
It's all good. The far more important thing is the microphone, and that headset is great. You are one of the, I would say one of the better sounding, from an audio standpoint.
Oh, yes. Is that right? Yeah. These are great. I mean, I think you said you got them for Rich Roney, correct?
I tried to get, I did get him a
something
headset.
Similar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know I've said this in other episodes, but yeah, doing these remote podcasts with Rich it's been a little challenging. We've made it work.
He went through the entire COVID without having internet at home. I don't know how. It's incredible, actually.
And this has come up in other episodes, and it's just, if the pandemic didn't prompt him to get it, I truly don't think anything ever will.
No, for sure. He had a conversation. So he has an iPhone, but he doesn't use the iPhone to do internet searching. And he said that it's because it's the company's phone. And I wonder how many employees on any company across this country feel that way still. Like, it's amazing that he's like Superman. He's like such a Boy Scout. I love him. Love him to death.
I know the integrity that he has.
Integrity is the word I was looking for. There you go.
I mean, my feeling is do you have a work phone?
No, I don't. But if I had one, I'd be using it to go on the internet for sure.
And it's like,
I wouldn't even think twice.
And I might have one, and it might have unlimited data. And so my feeling is listen, it's unlimited. Yeah. Well, why let it just sit there?
Yeah.
But but
talking about work, is that something we could talk about?
Yeah.
How's the new job?
It's great. So, and I don't mean to keep plugging the other show, but I'm just saying I did a whole episode.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No. I didn't watch this. Listen to the other show. I'll listen to it later. Don't waste your time.
No. It's all right. No, I did a whole episode though of Digging for Kryptonite about how a scene from Superman and Lois actually partly inspired this. But I got a new job at the same place that's fully remote. So that solved a daycare situation and all that stuff. And it was time for a change. And it's been. I like it. There were a few big time sensitive projects that I had to jump right into. And I also had a project from the prior role that I still had to finish up. So the past few weeks, it's been a little bit much, but I'm in a good place now. And it's been great so far. I really, if you had told me that this opportunity would come up and that it would be remote, it was very, very surprising. I'm really, really happy that it worked out. Sometimes I have these moments where I'm like, I can't, but it's really what I want. I got what I wanted. This was what I wanted out of work and life, and I got it. So I'm very happy and very appreciative.
So this is long-term, working remotely.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's not a COVID thing. The position is remote.
So my brother, who works at an insurance company, similar to what Rich Roney used to do, he said that his company is largely thinking about pulling back, the office space and just having everybody work remotely because they had been doing that largely during the pandemic. It was efficient. And I guess people are happier. The employees are happier. They're working harder because I guess they want to get their work done so they can, get on with the rest of their day. And I think it's going to wind up being a model that we see in the future a lot more. the university gave us the option still. If we wanted to teach our classes remotely, we could still stay at home. But, most of us opted to go back to school because I think we were clawing at the walls. But because it's very difficult with the remote learning. But, it's nice to know that, employers are being mindful of this as a new path forward. And I don't think that would have been the case had COVID not, descended upon us.
Yeah, no, very, very true. I mean, it's funny though. I don't know how much this is really a product of what you just described. Because there's like one other job at the school that's remote. I don't know that this is a direction they're moving in. I think it makes a lot of sense, but in any event, it worked out well. Let's take
for sure.
one final commercial break, and then when we come back, we got to talk about Halloween. So
for sure,
we'll be right back, and we'll do a little Halloween talk. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. All right, first of all, can you believe that it's been a year since we did part one of this?
No, and I'm amazed that a year has gone by in both of our lives, and it's nowadays, when you're younger, I don't know if you measure time differently, but it seems like it takes forever for something to happen. As you're a kid growing up, it's like you can't wait till you get older. As an adult, the days just fly by, and the years apparently too. It's great being back here. As always, I love talking to you on the podcast, but I can't believe 12 months has been in between the first Long Halloween episode and now. It's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Actually,
I was thinking the other day, it's how many could it be? Oh my gosh, I added them up. I was like, holy crap. It's the entire episode's just like Long Halloween. It's 13 episodes. Unreal.
Can you do me a favor though and just turn down your
sorry.
Your headphone volume just a little bit, because I'm getting a little bit of myself on on your end. If you just
the whole time?
No, I've just heard it a little bit.
All right, I'm sorry.
Our audience most likely, I don't think it would even be detectable, but with these headphones, anyway, I can't believe a year. The thing that's, it's disheartening because I haven't gone back and re-listened to part one, but I'm almost positive that in that episode I was like, we're doing these remotely for now, and I'm sure that by the end of them we'll be doing them in person. Maybe you'll be in town for a visit. We can do the finale in person. Yeah. And honestly, I don't have any in-person recordings. I don't have anything planned anytime soon.
Yeah.
Do you have any visits planned?
Dynamic? To New York? Yeah. So I don't think, next time I come to New York, I might need to sleep on your couch, if that's okay.
Sure.
Or maybe Steve Oto's couch or somebody. So my parents will be moving for good in October. So next month, they will no longer be in New York. So when I come to New York now, it literally will be just to visit you guys. I still plan on coming, but I think my frequency is going to be a lot less. And while I intended on coming this past year, COVID just made it impossible. And that's why you didn't see me this year, and I'm sorry. But hopefully in the future, once this is all over, I'm planning on coming up. I mean, I like the idea. So Logan, his other set of grandparents is still in New York. I fully intend on being in New York, but it will be a while after my parents leave.
No, I totally understand. And I look forward to when we can be in person again. Where you were asking if how's the dynamic been doing it remotely?
Yeah. It's got to be different.
I got to tell you though, not as different as you might think. This is why, as you know, and as the audience knows, historically, I only did episodes in person. Even if that meant there were guests I couldn't have because of geography. Yeah. And look, going back to the first season when we were doing those episodes in the store as it was emptying out, of course that added to the discussion we were having. That, and being literally in the same space with someone, I think that's always the best. And look, as far as audio quality, yes, if we're in the same room and we don't have to rely on Wi-Fi and we're on same mics and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it'll sound better. But as far as just the connecting with someone and just being dialed into the conversation, honestly, I don't feel like the episodes have suffered for doing them remotely. Truly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, I think it's just, you and all the guests like have been great. And I think like, we're just happy to connect and have the conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And we're used to, again, we're used to doing all of this stuff through a screen anyway. So I think, I think all of that kind of, feeds in together, but no, like, I don't know. I don't feel like again, like audio, and again, I'm happy with what we've been able to achieve from an audio standpoint as well. But even that aside, like just in terms of the, like the quality of the conversation that we're having, I really don't feel like we've lost anything.
So having said that, now, when we are allowed to go back face to face at some point, maybe it'll be a mix, right? So you'll do a few here and there, but it sounds like this works out pretty well.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing like, well, like looking ahead to next year with the Fat Moose saga.
Sure.
The original owner of the store, he now lives out in Seattle. So,
so this is the way you'll do it.
Right, right. So that's perfect. And honestly, like even with Sean himself, it's like now that he's the owner of the store, I mean, his availability to come here is vastly more limited. And, even for me now to take what would be a 2-hour round trip drive, plus the recording, I mean, would have to carve out a day, to go there and do the recording. Yeah. So, there are a lot of instances where I would continue to do it this way. Now, Ken Marion, who lives 15 minutes from me, like the next time he can actually be here and we could talk Superman together, it's like, yeah, we'll do that. So yeah, it'll definitely be a mix moving forward.
Cool.
So Halloween.
What do you want to talk about with Halloween?
I don't know. I guess. Is it too, again, we're recording this over Labor Day. So is it too early yet for Logan to be thinking about costumes or is he?
So last year it was heartbreaking, right? Because, as a kid, Halloween is one of those things you look forward to. And I don't know if it's just because you want to dress up, probably less to an extent of dressing up and more to like going to get this candy haul. And it didn't matter that I could said, hey, I'll get you as much candy as you want. It wasn't the point, and he kind of understood that. And it was sad to see it, and you don't even know how to console a kid. I mean, he's at that age where Halloween is a big deal in his life. And so last year we had to obviously cancel Halloween. And I think Halloween was canceled. I didn't go out that night to see if anybody was trick-or-treating. I don't think they were. But this year, I don't know if it's going to be different. I'm assuming that trick-or-treating is going to happen because I think, at least in my town, they want to believe that COVID is over. But I certainly won't be taking Logan out. I don't think Leah would either. I think we're like you. We're we go out when it's absolutely necessary and try to play it close to our chest kind of thing. And so I don't know how that affects him long term, like when he looks forward to that or he looks back at this, is what I mean. I don't know. I didn't even get him a costume last year. That's the thing. Like I always make him a costume. We always do stuff. It was like, I guess we were still living with this, like, the anxiety of COVID and whatnot. And so it's like, how could I even think about going to the store to get a costume that you're not, I don't know. It was sad.
Yeah, I know. It's like, my heart goes out to kids, particularly of his age, where it's like, you're old enough, like you understand what's going on. And it's like the anxiety and the frustration of not, like Milo doesn't know, like, it's like, there's no conception of like, oh, there's a pandemic and there are certain things we can't do. It's, challenging because it's like, we can't explain it to him but it doesn't, it's fine. And, we've worked out our system of what we are comfortable doing and all of that. But, and again, like for kids who have been, on Zoom school and all that, like, I know, it's, we were grateful that, as challenging as it was to have a 1-year-old and now a 2-year-old during this, it's like, I look at what the challenges would be like having, a kid in elementary school. And it's like, yeah, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So no thoughts of costumes yet then for this year, or would he even, if you're not going out, like he wouldn't even dress up or take some photos, do like a photo shoot sort of thing.
Yeah. We'll do something. I think we have to at this point. He has not expressed interest, but, in a costume. It used to be like when he was a little bit younger, he knew like a month ahead of time, 2 months ahead of time what he was going to be. In some instances, he had 2 costumes, one at my house and one at Leah's house. He was so excited. And so we'll see what happens this year. And if we do a photo shoot, you'll expect to see pictures online.
Yeah, no, of course.
No, for sure.
That would be great. So yeah, I don't know the next time we'll see you in person, but yeah, hopefully it won't be too. I mean, it's the sort of thing where, because I posted a photo of Flat Squirrel Studios like a little while ago, and I talked about how, when I set up this space, this was July 2020, right? So the pandemic was raging, but when I set up this space, I got a couch and a coffee table, and I set up 2 microphones, and I was like, well, eventually, like pretty
soon,
your studio.
Yeah.
I was like, pretty soon it'll be me and a guest sitting across from each other doing these episodes. Yeah. And I think that sense of like, oh, it'll end. Like there's going to be a clearly defined endpoint to this. I think I've been disabused of that notion now. It's like, I think this is something we just live with to some extent. And once like Milo can get vaccinated, we'll just feel more comfortable doing things. But like until then, we've been very guarded.
Well, right, and not to bring it on a somber note, but like that Delta variant and potentially the Lambda that's now kind of creeping up, it seems like the kids are getting it and getting hospitalized, which is scary. And so we're very careful with Logan at the moment, and you have to be.
Yeah.
Well, and at the same time, you don't want to be like driving like the doom and gloom, like again, you don't know how this is really affecting him. Leah's father got COVID. He was vaccinated, and he got COVID. And thankfully, he was fine. In about a week and a half or 2 weeks, he was symptom-free, but he was sick enough to get a test and that showed he was positive. And Logan really took it hard. And so, not that I want to be careful with what I say to him, but I want to be careful. I don't want him to live in fear, and I think it's very easy for a kid his age to, go that direction. I don't want that for him. And you don't want that for your kids,
I'm sure
but it's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a very tough line I do think about that, not just with COVID, but with any of the dangers that exist in this world. It's like, you want to make sure your kid is careful. So there should be some amount of fear, but like you don't want them like paralyzed and unable
living in fear.
Function.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that must be a tough line to walk.
Well, again, like Logan is 10. He wants to have sleepovers. He wants to go to his friend's house. He wants his friends to come over. And that's something that, we've been, not allowing him to do at the moment. But, hopefully that does change in the future. I can't imagine this is going to be forever, but, maybe for another year or so, I think this is how life is going to be. And that's what I tell him too. I said, hopefully it'll be over soon. As funny as a kid, he's looking forward to the vaccine when he can get it, because I think he also realizes that that's going to be some anxiety off his shoulders. That he must have shoulders that he doesn't even show us or it doesn't tell us about. You know.
No, I mean, like that's the thing. I mean, for Steph and myself being fully vaccinated, it's like, we feel some measure of security for ourselves. Though again, there's even if we didn't have Milo, like there are definitely certain situations we wouldn't place ourselves in just in case. But especially, having an unvaccinated child, it's like, and I've said this so many times, but it's like, even if it's statistically small, it's like, I don't want to take that chance. Like of course,
it's not worth the risk. Whatever the risk is.
Yeah, like we took him for his 2-year checkup recently, and the pediatrician, she's lovely, she's great, and she has a very calming way about her, and puts us at ease. And in the beginning, when we first had him, and we didn't know what we were doing, and it's like, is it the the right formula, and like, is it okay to give formula, and like all those new parent questions and fears and all that stuff. Like, she was so great with being like, it's fine, like whatever you're doing is good. But I feel like she's a little bit, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to say lax, but not, when we talk about COVID and all of that, like at this recent appointment, she was like, well, like the kids aren't really getting it. It's like, I don't know. I'm seeing enough in the news where, again, even if it's statistically a small amount, it's like, do you want to gamble with your kids' lives? Like,
of course, never. Yeah.
So bringing it back to alternate realities, and not to be a downer, but we talked in prior episodes about Carolyn getting married in October.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're gonna be able to
Mike Sangregorio as the what is he, the man of honor or something?
I thought he was. Yes.
What's his title? His official title?
I thought he was officiating it. That's not.
Oh, okay. No, I thought it was like he was like the maid of honor, but a guy.
He's the man of honor, I guess, is the title. Yes. Oh, in my head, I was like, oh, he's officiating it. But yeah, and it's like, when we got the invitation in July.
Did it say like contingent upon?
I don't think it said that, but when we got it, I mean, we were like, yeah, we're looking forward to it. And, we saw Carolyn.
Like you said, you started looking good.
And we saw Carolyn at Shake Shack, and we had just gotten the invitation. And I even said to her, I was like, oh, we would have brought you the response card here. But now with the turn that this has taken, it's like, I don't feel comfortable enough to take the risk. So,
no, for sure.
But anyway, I guess continuing along the alternate realities track here, but and maybe on a positive note to kind of like bring this all together. So
I'll give you a positive one too.
Oh yeah, go for it.
You want? Well, you go first.
No, you go, please.
All right, you said Halloween. I thought maybe you'd want an alternate realities Halloween story.
Oh, it'd be great.
All right, so Brandon was the owner of the store at years ago, and I don't even know when this story takes place, but in my mind, they're all like it's like this continuum, and so. Brandon, was always trying to break into comic books, even when he was in the comic book shop. And eventually he went out to California with Jen, and he started, I think, at Tokyo Pop, but then he came back. He did DC stuff for a while. Even before that, he was trying to court some celebrities and people of note within the comics community. And so he befriended Bernie Wrightson, and he convinced Bernie Wrightson to do a signing at the comic book shop during Halloween, right? And it was going to be this big thing. We advertised the hell out of it. You asked when was the last time we advertised? Well, we advertised the hell out of Bernie Wrightson coming to the comic shop. And so there was going to be a Halloween costume contest. And the person who wins the costume contest gets a piece of original artwork by Bernie Wrightson, right? So this is a great thing, right? So Halloween comes. Bernie Wrightson's there. He's an older gentleman at the time. And he brings tons of stuff to sell. Tons of stuff, right? Artwork he had prints. He was ready to sign books. Nobody shows up. And so Brandon is like running to the store at the front. It's like, people that I knew weren't there. Like my brother, for example, he's like, get your brother down here. Meet him in the parking lot and give him $100 and make him buy stuff from Bernie Wrightson. And like, that's what was, Brandon was doing, trying to like, make it so it wasn't so bad. But the Halloween costume contest was, again, like how do you judge the costume contest? And so a couple of people had some random stuff. We had a customer named Doc Ben, and he came in dressed as a werewolf, but not really. But we gave, and this is good full circle, we gave the Halloween costume contest winner to Rich Roney for coming in as Jeffrey Dahmer. You got a piece of original artwork by Bernie Wrightson. You could probably ask him about it. I wonder where he has it. This is a true story.
How did he take that?
I think he took it with grace, like he always does. I think everybody got a good laugh at it because we always used to say that Rich looked like Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh my god!
At the time, funny. He definitely did. If you ever looked at older pictures of Rich, he kind of did.
They're so rare, but every now and then Steve will post them as he goes through his archives, and they're fascinating to see.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's your alternate realities Halloween story.
I mean, what happened? Was it, especially that it was advertised, and even just among the regular customers.
I don't know. Well, I guess it's Halloween. It's probably not the best time to have a signing. People were doing their own things. They were trick-or-treating with their kids. Nobody showed up. Nobody bought anything except who Brandon met in the parking lot to give them money to buy stuff. I think Drew bought stuff just to buy stuff. I had to buy stuff. We all had to buy stuff. Yeah.
How did Bernie Wrightson take it?
I think he was fine. He was just having a good time. I think him and Brandon at that point were pretty good pals. So it was just like a hangout for the both of them, which was fine.
Yeah.
But he had like a whole little booth too. It wasn't just like he came and sat at like the little table with the green tablecloth. Like he brought like a whole like, Halloween-y looking booth that he would probably bring to a comic book convention. He set up in the middle of the store. It was a real deal. That was a real signing that we mishandled that one.
That's tough. I'm sure, as for him as a a creative person, it's like, I'm sure it wasn't the first time. Especially when he was up and coming, it's like, and even once he was established, as this situation, shows, it's like, you never know. Look, going back to my documentary pursuits, I've had screenings where it's just me and Steph. It's like, and it's tough, but it is what it is. Speaking of artists though, I thought of you. Did you see this? That, cause I know your buddies, I don't know if you're still in touch with Phil Noto.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Every now and again, I'll get a random text message, which is kind of fun. Kind of like what you and Lord Retail. You said you just got a message that's kind of like non sequitur. You're like, I don't even know what this is. Every now and again, I'll get a message from Phil. Why? What is he doing? I haven't even noticed
No,
recently.
I just saw. So I don't know if you saw the Black Widow movie.
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, so Florence Pugh, the young actress, she plays the sister of Natasha, and in real life, she's dating Zach Braff. And Zach Braff commissioned a piece from Phil Noto of Florence Pugh as her Black Widow character.
I've seen that then. So he posted it on his Instagram page. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah. And it's funny too, because the face is such an un-Phil Noto face, but it's like very true to the character, which is great, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah. That was
so
cool.
I did see that.
I thought of you when I saw that. Are you
nice.
So like again? I know you've been reading the Batman Long Halloween stuff, but are you going to any comic shops these days, or are you reading anything old stuff, or no?
Not really. The other day, I picked up another copy of The Killing Joke because I happened to see it at a used bookstore. It's like, oh well, I don't know if you know, but I have like a half a dozen copies of The Watchmen and a couple of other random books. I always give them out as like lending copies, and I usually don't expect them back. I think that's what happened to my original copy of Long Halloween, by the way, because I had to buy a copy. Not that I wouldn't want to have that in my collection, but I started reading comic books again ever since you started, re-engaging me in the media. And for many years, kind of like Carolyn, I think, was saying too, it's like it's kind of hard when you don't have the comic book shop to like bounce stories off of, see what everybody else is reading. I'm not as active participant in the book club. Maybe I should. But I started rereading some Frank Miller Daredevil that I really like. I was reading some Chris Claremont, John Byrne X-Men, and so I wind up looking backwards rather than forwards. Anytime I go to a comic book shop nowadays, I look at the new comic wall, and I just can't get into it for whatever reason, and I want to. But you were talking about getting a pull list again. I don't know if you still have a pull list, but I think it's tough, right? Keeping up with it now. It's so much easier to get a trade, and I think the stories were a lot better 10, 20, 30 years ago. Maybe that's because that was my golden years of comic book collecting.
I ask myself that all the time, because I did have that experiment a few years ago now at the Spider's Web in Yonkers when DC Rebirth started. So 2016. So 5 years ago. It's that long ago. And, I think I wanted the experience to be more than I think was realistic for it to be. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I wanted the experience of going into the shop to replicate what AR used to be like. And you can't. I mean, and they were a great shop and they were perfectly friendly. But it was just like, it's not going to be the same. And for the comics, I don't know. I try to be careful about this because I don't want to paint with a broad, brush and be like, oh, like all the new stuff, it's not as good. But I mean, I don't know. I do think, generally speaking, that it's, qualitatively on average, like I don't know if it's quite there. And that's not to say there's not good stuff happening, but I also feel, like as a DC fan in particular, I don't know that there's much of a master plan and coordination. Mm-hmm. I haven't even been reading this stuff, so that might be unfair to say, but from what I've been reading about the comics and just articles about, their publishing initiatives and stuff like that, like it doesn't instill much confidence. So I think there might be something to the current books not being as strong, but then, I do also think, and I know this for yourself too, it's like, going back to those times when we were at alternate realities, so much of probably our views of certain comics are tied in with the experience of getting them there and talking about them there and reading them during a certain point in our lives where, and I've experienced this as I've been going back to stuff on the Superman show. Like there's stuff that I loved when I was 13. And I read it now and it holds a special place for me. And there's stuff that I still like about it, but does it entertain me the same way now? No, it doesn't, and I can recognize that. So I think there's a lot of stuff, mixed up in that, but like yourself, I too find myself gravitating more to what's come before, but I am mindful, especially with the podcast of I don't want to neglect what's happening now. And I want to give it a fair shake. So I am trying to be mindful of that, but overall I'm with you.
Yeah. And maybe I said that statement too with a broad stroke, but I will say, I'll qualify that and say that, Batman has always been a character that I love. And, one of the more recent times I went to the store, I think the cover of the comic, he it was Batman, but maybe it was Joker. I don't know. It had like some kind of thing over his eyes with spikes. Robin was in chains, and maybe there was a bunch of Robins. They looked like dogs. I don't know what that was. And I was like, this is so far from the character. I can't believe it's like, being entertained as like, oh, this is where the direction we want to go with Batman. And so I didn't even take it off the shelf to flip through it. I mean, that's how much it was just like, oh, this is not for me. But then Long Halloween, all day. I'll take a look at that. Dark Knight Returns, I'll read that every month if you let me, things like that. And I think, every time I read books like that, I get something out of it. And I think that age thing that you mentioned is very, critical. I looked at pictures of us not too long ago, and certainly you started this episode, that picture of all of us at that round table at the diner. We were young kids. Even in that photo, we were young kids, and that was only a few years ago. And, certainly the things that I liked when I was at the comic shop are not the same things I like now, but I do have that same appreciation for it. But I feel like some of the things that I definitely knew were of, critical importance, like the Dark Knight Returns or the Watchmen. I feel like when I read them now, I see even more so why it's such a historically relevant piece of literature. And, I feel like I get a lot out of that. I rather reread books like that than, I don't know, some of the newer stuff.
I think it was probably Batman Metal, Dark Knight Metal, or something like that.
Sounds right. Yeah. I don't know. And again, maybe it's incredible. It might be. I personally, I didn't pick it up. I did pick up though while I was there. I think it was Frank Miller, I want to say, and John Romita Jr. A Superman comic. It was like a big prestige, almost magazine style comic. I got the first issue, and I never went back to get the other ones. I wasn't drawn in. Is all I'll say.
That was year. That was year one. That was year one.
Sounds right.
I haven't read it. It's funny. As we're recording this, I have a couple of open spots on the digging for Kryptonite for the end of the year, and I was kind of toying with possibly doing that. From what I read of it, I don't know how much I will like it, but it would probably be good fodder for discussion. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I do think that. I do think there is value in. Actually, let me take a step back, because I don't. For people who are still following stuff monthly and they're enjoying it and it's a positive experience and it's a fun part of their routine and all that stuff, like that's great, and I'm not knocking.
Absolutely.
That.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think one of the things that's been cool, like what you're doing on your own and what we've done on the podcast as well, like when we did our Darwin Cook episode, that was awesome. Yeah. When you kind of have a little bit of distance between when the work comes out and when you're looking at it, I guess if you let some time pass, you get to see what actually has staying power and what's worth revisiting. I think sometimes I remember this experience of like going into the store and like being excited for the new books, and that was fun. Right. But it's like, how many of those would I necessarily go back to now? Maybe not so many, but it's like with some time and distance, it's like you get to see like, okay, like what really is worth going back to, like what does stand the test of time, and really investing your time in that, like I found to be more worthwhile than trying to like keep up with the, like I just don't have that interest anymore. Like I'm perfectly content to kind of wait a while and then read some reviews and kind of just see what how it all shakes out, and then dive into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will just follow it up by saying I am an advocate for comic books. You know that, and I definitely would not discourage anybody from reading what's on the shelves now. But I think this is something that, like Carolyn had mentioned too. Like as you get older, you have different responsibilities, and so at the end of the day, time is limited, and reading comic books is almost like a privilege nowadays. And so I definitely reach for something that I know that I'm going to appreciate, and maybe something that I want to see, how it holds up. Like Kingdom Come is on my nightstand, and it's like the next thing that I want to read because I haven't read that in decades now at this point. And I remember really enjoying that book, and I can't wait to see it again or read it again with a fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
It's gotten to the point where, I barely remember the plot. I know it, Captain Marvel's implicated, Lex Luthor and things like that, but, the details of it, I don't, I couldn't tell you one way or the other. So I'm looking forward to like seeing that again or reading that again.
Yeah, no, I hope you enjoy when you do. That's on my list to revisit as well, because it's been decades for me too. I mean, that's a weird one. I don't know why I haven't gone back to that more.
Yeah.
But I am looking forward to it.
When I was younger and that came out, I remember getting the individual issues and very excited to read those as they were coming out. But then reading it as a whole, I must have read that book like at least a dozen times all the way through. My favorite scene with Lex Luthor, and Batman when he leans over is like Shazam at the end. It's like such a great like moment. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to like what my 40-year-old eyes to get out of that book. That's for sure.
I mean, that's the other thing too, is, especially now with the Superman stuff, like going back and looking at stuff with adult eyes. I mean,
yeah,
it's really such a fascinating process. And it's like, I don't know, maybe I would do it again when I'm an old man and then I'll get something different out of it.
Yeah, for
again.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But especially all this stuff that I read as a kid, I mean, to now, go back to it as an adult. It's a whole different perspective and you get something different out of it. It's been definitely very worthwhile. Circling back to, alternate realities and just to kind of button up, I guess what I was saying before, in doing all of these episodes, for each, like leading into each one, especially with people I'm not in regular contact with. So I didn't need to do this so much with Rich or with you or with Steve, but with some of the other folks who have been on who I don't talk to all the time, like I really thought about our friendships and I guess kind of some of the defining events and stuff like that. And it was great to have those conversations. And yeah, I did feel this theme of like, I miss everyone. Like there's this longing, it seems, to want to be together, but that doesn't translate into the action to make it happen. And, but on the positive, well, I guess this part isn't so positive, but I think this supports like exactly what you articulated in the new documentary. And it was so important. And it's what we basically end the movie on is, for all the people who are like, oh, it's just four walls. It's just the space, the friendships endure. That's true. And when we do get together, it's great. But to your point, it's like, there is something about that space. And I think, seeing what's transpired since then supports that. It's like when you don't have a mechanism for the connection, whether it's San Gregorio's book club, or the Rich Roney call list, or this podcast, or this, it's like when there's not a mechanism for it, it just doesn't really happen. So it's like that space was important. I mean, the bonds endure, but it's not the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't even know how to add to that. You said it so clearly. I mean, a Saturday morning would come. I mean, I would be at the store as soon as I could when I was in college. And, I knew that all of my best friends would be there at some point throughout the day. And it was never like, oh, let me call up Rich to make sure he's coming in. I knew he would be in, and that was part of it. It was our clubhouse, so to speak. And, not having that clubhouse makes it, like you said, so much harder. And yeah, I mean, I'm so quick to jump on a call with you or Rich or anybody who calls. But it's not the same as what we had. And maybe it's because, like we were saying when we were younger, right? Reading the comic books when we were younger. I mean, it was the perfect time of our lives to have done that. We were all in, high school, college era, and it just made sense. We didn't have the lives that we have now, but I still think that if the store was there, it would be different, right? I think still we would make the effort to go and get together every weekend. I mean, I think I would. If I lived in New York and the store was there, absolutely. Every Saturday night. Leah, when, my ex-wife, she used to hate when we would come home. Like, I lived in Baltimore, and I would come up for a weekend. But Saturday was the store, right? So I got to see my family, her family, Friday, and a little bit on Sunday, but all day Saturday, at least for me. Maybe because I'm crazy. But
all right, I want to circle. I want to circle back to that, but on a positive note, I did want to say this. I'm bringing it back to that Brian O'Day story of running into him at the rest stop. It's like alternate realities was there in that instant when we ran into each other, and we only chatted for a few minutes, but it's like it was there, and
like no time had passed either.
Exactly, and I think that's the positive takeaway that I've had from that encounter with Brian and doing all of these episodes is that, I think if we look at it in terms of what it was, no, it's not the same. And there's some sadness associated with that. But I think for myself, and if, for anyone else who chooses to look at it this way, great. But for myself, I think the thing that I want to try to get in the habit of is really looking at again, the gift of what the store gave us, that you can bring alternate realities to life in these interactions when we do have them, and to be able to pick up with someone right where you left off, like that is such a gift, and the store gave it to us. And so, yeah, it's not the same. It can't be the same, but it is something different and valuable in its own way. And that's something that, I really want to take to heart. And that's something that I've gotten out of this year of the LongAR Halloween. And, as much as, when you think about the store closing, there's always going to be that, the sadness there. But I mean, I'm really trying to look at, accept the fact that it has to be different. It is different, but that there's something really beautiful about what it is now.
No, absolutely. The store did give us a gift. And Anthony, this year you gave me a gift, let me tell you. Not only having me and being able to sit here and reminisce with you, but listening to everybody that you interviewed over the course of the year. It was like visiting with friends. And I really felt in many cases that I was part of the discussion, like they were in the room. And, I was incredible to think so many people also brought me up in their conversations. And, I every time I just like, you have that feeling that blood rushing throughout your body. I don't even know what that feeling is, but it's like, I can't even believe they remember this, or they feel this way about me. And it was just an incredible feeling to have gotten, being so far away from all of you guys. And, it was, thank you for that.
Oh, no.
I don't know how to articulate that.
No, of course. I want to circle back though to what you were saying about you thinking that it would be the same as it was if the store were still here. That's where, I don't know. I think that's debatable. And that's why, we talked when we did part 1 of this about how we were grateful that the store closed because, again, Steve didn't want to be doing it anymore and he was getting burnt out, but we wouldn't have wanted to see what running the store during COVID would have done to him. So it's like, it really, it was overall, it was for the best. But I mean, I think it's different for you because you went away and then it, how do I put this? I feel like and maybe others, at this point, but I feel like for myself, I now see the store maybe in a way that you did when you went away. It's like when you don't have the access to it, you build it up even more, and it comes to mean so much more to you. And so again, for you, sure, you were away, so it's like you couldn't go to the store, and when you were able to, it's like you went right there and you thought about it, and
absolutely,
and I think it took on that enhanced meaning. And I think now for myself and a lot of the rest of us, like it has become further mythologized, in our minds because we don't have it. But like, I don't know. I mean, and I've talked about this before. In the final years of the store, I mean, I was not there as much. I mean, that was when I was starting to work full time. I wasn't as into comics. I started dating Steph. Like, it's not that I was completely MIA, but it wasn't as much a part of my routine. And you look at everyone else now, even then, but even now, 6 years out, and again, who's gotten married, moved, or not as into comics. Like there are a lot of factors there. Even Rich Roney, it's like I don't know. He's getting older. It's like I don't know how regularly he would come in to make the drive, even if the store were. So I don't know. Like there are all these factors where I don't know that you would have that.
You're right. And listen, when I lived in Baltimore or Philadelphia, 95% of the year, I had a completely different life. It did not involve the comic book shop. And it was only those instances when I came home visiting family, and that became the biggest reason I was home. It was the comic shop, And so it was only because I was like displaced from my life, my normal life, so to speak, that I was able to re-engage the comic shop as if I was still in college or high school, being at the store. And that was what was so magical for me about the store, was that within those walls, I could have been 20 years old again. It just had that ability for me. It was like a fountain of youth almost. And very much so, it was like a Peter Pan escapism, right? Because I had a life in Philadelphia and Baltimore. I had responsibilities. I had work. But when I was there, I was talking about comic books. I was hanging out with Steve Odo, and, we were laughing again. And it was wonderful, It was like extra memories on top of the memories I had. So I miss that for sure. And I still do. Yeah. But you're right. I don't think maybe if I was living at home, just like you guys, life gets in the way, for good and bad, right? For mostly good. But yeah, it would be probably difficult. You're right. But it's fun to think. Isn't it pretty to think though that we could have done that?
It is. No, it is. But that's why, again, I feel like the ending of the store, and I know I've used this word before, including just a minute ago, but was a gift because it had the store endured. Mm-hmm. And even putting Steve's harsh feelings towards it aside, like if it had endured,
the harsh feelings of being left in the lurch those feelings.
Yeah, that, and just like his general disillusionment with running the store. Like even putting that aside, like for if those of us in the core group kind of continued to sort of go there less and less, and maybe the dinners became less and less frequent. And again, I think there's an argument to make that would I mean, it's like, I think there would still be gatherings, but I don't know. I mean, I just looking at the direction that we were kind of already going in and what's happened since, it's like, I don't know. So for argument's sake, like if that wasn't going to happen, then the store is there, but it, we're not having the same relationship with it. And then you just kind of take it for granted. I feel like the store closing, like it really forced everyone to recognize what it meant to us. And it just cemented it in everyone's head as that. I mean, not that we didn't recognize it before, but it took it to another level. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think like that was one of the gifts of the store closing.
Absolutely. You always get forced into a looking back perspective when something ends. And it definitely had that has an enduring potential still, certainly in our minds. But, I think it was probably the right time. What could have happened, though, is that the store would have ended for us, but then continued, and that community continued for other people. And that's sad that never happened. We never knew the next generation underneath us. I mean, you're the generation underneath me, so to speak. And who knows who would have come.
That is a very good point. And I know it is sad to think like what could have been. And it's like,
but it is what it is.
It's like, would a new generation have come up? I don't know. I mean,
who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? You can't even worry about it.
Yeah. But in any event, is there anything else that you want to talk about before we sign off here?
I think I think we covered a lot today. I will just say, thank God for Rich Roney. You asked for the theme, and you were 100% right. He is. He holds it all together, and I love that guy. I love Rich Roney. To this day, I can't tell you how much I appreciate his calls. And Anthony, I love you too, man. You're one of my best friends, and you've always been. And so I was really happy to do these podcasts with you. This, the beginning and the end, especially about the comic book shop. And like I had already mentioned, it was so great to revisit with a lot of people throughout this year and hear their stories, and especially, they're growing up, becoming adults, and like what they're doing now. It's really wonderful to hear. Some of the things were sad, like listening to Steve and how he feels isolated, but that again forced me to finally reach out to him. And I certainly, in retrospect, need to do a lot more of that. Maybe you can expect calls from me every Saturday. I don't know if anytime soon, but I got to figure out how to work this into my life. But I would love to, if I could.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, I think other than Rich, I think it's something that we all could, could work on.
Yeah.
But no, I love you too, man. And, I'd forgotten about this, but, we had a text exchange a little while back. I think I was asking you about dates for recording or something. This was months ago. And I don't know, like maybe I had to follow up with you or something like that, but you were apologetic, but you said something like, I'm sorry, I always let you down.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart when I read that, because I'm like, never let me down. I mean, it's like, that's the furthest way that I would look at you or our friendship. So it breaks my heart if you feel that way, because I certainly don't.
Yeah. I never respond right away. It's always hard for me. Right. And especially with you and some other people, it's like, cause you deserve so much more than like the 2-second response. You know what I mean? Like in my head, it's like, oh, I got to respond to Anthony, but it's not just like, oh yes, or, whatever. It's like, hey, how you doing? Like, let's talk. Like, I always want to catch up, and I always want to, and then what winds up happening is like days go by because, a million fires go off, and so I always let you down. I really do. I feel that in my heart, and I'm sorry.
I mean, if this helps at all, I really don't look at it that way.
Right.
And
I appreciate it.
But look, if there's ever anything that's urgent, I'll just call you. And
please do.
If I text you and I don't hear,
phone.
Here's the thing too. It's like, with all of the scheduling for these shows and stuff, like I plan far in advance, and I do that for a number of reasons, including like, if it takes you a few days to get back to me and I need to follow up, it's like, that's fine.
Or I had to cancel like I did, and I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I felt bad about that too.
it's, again, that's why I learned the lesson from Odo about, like, not so much planning in advance, but having backups for backups of backups, like that whole thing. So it's all, it's all good. And so I certainly don't look at you as someone who lets me down. I mean, quite the contrary. I mean, you're so supportive and such a great friend, and one of my best friends as well. And I cherish our conversations on and off mic. And I'm so glad that we've been able to do, again, it's crazy that it's been a year, but that we've been able to bookend this LongAR Halloween event.
No, it's been wonderful doing this with you. So thanks for having me, for sure.
My pleasure. Thank you for being a part of this. And thank you to the audience for celebrating a year's worth of holidays with the Alternate Realities gang. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope this helped, maybe make the pandemic a little bit more entertaining. I hope that it helped, maybe capture some of that Alternate Realities magic. When we did our 100th episode segment, I know I sent you one of the YouTube comments. It was one of the nicest things about how like the conversation made them feel like they were at the store. It's like, that was beautiful.
I couldn't even, And people said that about your other works too, which is incredible,
But no, I always appreciate that. And I really think, like, these episodes in particular that we've done over this past year, are as close to what you would hear at the store. I mean, it's not really like we're putting on a show for this. I mean, this is really like what it's like.
Yeah. If you came out to dinner with us and you sat next to me and any of the guests, or me and you, this is the conversation we would have had.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Bill. I hope you, your son, your family continue to stay safe and healthy and have the best Halloween that you can.
For sure. Yeah. Happy Halloween to you, Anthony, and your family. For sure. I hope Milo gets to dress up as the Superman again this year. I hope. He was so cute as little Superman.
So as of this recording, Steph recently looked for, like, she was, I don't know where she was, but she looked for, they didn't have a Superman ones, but we'll work on it. We'll order something. I think it's been, because we've dressed him up as Superman a few times, but I think whatever costume he previously had, he's now outgrown. So it's time for a new costume. So
for sure.
I think there might be some Facebook photos
that Batman is just as good.
Just as good. Look, whatever character, if any, he gravitates toward, that's perfectly fine. I'm along for the ride here. It's quite all right. But again, thank you to Bill. Thank you to our audience again for joining us. Make sure you come back next year for their comic shop history featuring Fat Moose Comics. It'll be a lot of fun. And in the meantime, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but make sure you check out Digging for Kryptonite. Even if you're not the biggest Superman fan in the world, we've had very thoughtful conversations, and we do understand and address why people might not feel the same way we do about Superman or certain characters or storylines. So again, even if you're not the biggest Superman fan, sample an episode. Hey, if you like Batman, sample the episode that Bill and I are going to do in a few weeks. You'll love it.
Definitely.
But again, thank you to everyone. I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy. And we'll end this episode the way we always do. Don't be a flat squirrel.
For sure.
My Comic Shop History is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Philtastic Filmenza, music by Basic Printer. If you like what you heard, be sure to listen to Digging for Kryptonite. Sign up for exclusive content at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato and watch My Comic Shop Country on Amazon, Apple TV, and CuriosityStream.